I'm State Representative Kate Farrar. I'm thrilled to be here with you all today in support of House Bill 5408, but I'm actually going to defer my time to Bruce Putterman, who can speak on the support for this particular bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Farrar. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bruce Putterman. I'm the publisher of the Connecticut Mirror. As you know, Bill 5408 is intended to support local journalism at its core. It does so by allocating a portion of budgeted state advertising dollars, digital and print advertising dollars specifically, to Connecticut-based news publishers. I'd like to offer 9 quick reasons in support of this bill. First, local journalism builds strong communities. It informs residents about what's happening in the state, and it engages them in democracy. But, number 2, local journalism, as you all know, is struggling across the country and here in Connecticut. Number 3, government funding for journalism is not new. It has been around since the founding of our country. It continues to this day. The state of Connecticut currently spends millions of dollars every year on advertising, which ultimately supports media companies. But, number 4, state advertising spending in Connecticut is skewed heavily toward out-of-state for-profit companies. Some of their revenue does stay in Connecticut because it pays salaries of Connecticut journalists, but the profitability from media companies that they derive from state advertising dollars goes to their shareholders and their owners and doesn't get reinvested here in the state. Number 5, 5408 is revenue neutral. It simply directs a portion of state digital and print advertising dollars to local news publishers in Connecticut to support local journalism here in Connecticut. Number 6, several dozen Connecticut print and digital news publishers would be eligible for funding through this bill, including the Connecticut Mirror, Connecticut News Junkie, Connecticut Public, WSHU, the New Haven Independent, Nancy on Norwalk, the Republican American of Waterbury, but also ethnic and community newspapers like Inquiring News or Identidad Latina, and several dozen hyper-local print and digital news organizations that serve individual towns or a cluster of towns throughout the state would also benefit from 5408. Next, a similar bill has been successfully adopted by New York City and Chicago. They've overcome objections related to the effectiveness of the advertising, recognizing that there are benefits that outweigh whatever concerns there might be about advertising or loss of advertising effectiveness. The concern about the bill diluting the effectiveness of state advertising dollars, I believe, is wrong. I would argue just the opposite, in fact, which is that allocating the bulk of state print and digital advertising dollars to news organizations with paywalls actually impedes the state's ability to reach people who can't afford or may not choose to pay for subscriptions, but who still need to be engaged in democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Farrar and Mr. Putterman. Are there questions from the committee? Representative Morambello.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your testimony. Just a quick question. What would the criteria look like to be eligible for this? And how many news organizations do you think would be eligible under this bill?
So at the broadest level, the key criterion is an in-state owned, and meaning that if you're a subsidiary, if you're like a locally or a state-owned LLC that's a subsidiary of a larger corporate entity, of which many of our daily newspapers are, in fact, they would not be eligible. So the bill excludes those out-of-state ownership groups specifically from this bill. In terms of the number of publishers that would be eligible, we don't know exactly, to tell you the truth. It's a very, as you know, a very fluid, dynamic kind of business media landscape at this point, but we suspect it's probably roughly 3 dozen different organizations, news organizations throughout the state.
Could I also answer that question for you, Representative?
Of course.
I think I would just add that in the bill, the way it is written, our Department of Administrative Services would be responsible for implementing some of those next steps related to the criteria beyond what is noted in the bill about in-state ownership. And looking to what's been done in New York and Chicago, there has been reference in the bill we put together this year to the ability for DAS to coordinate with a volunteer entity, third-party entity, to help in the implementation. And that's because in those cities of New York and Chicago, particularly educational institutions have worked with the city to help work through the criteria and help make clear in the implementation which publications would be eligible for the funding or not. And once again, the way the bill is written, it is indicating at least 50% of the funding that we're already spending on state advertising, but obviously that leaves the other 50% still allowable for any publications that we might have in the state.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. And also to note is in that bill, there are some carve-outs for some industries too. So do you want to speak to that?
Sure. The purpose of the carve-outs is a recognition of the fact that some state of Connecticut advertising is directed out of state, specifically tourism, economic development, and so we don't pretend that we are going to be more effective at reaching, potential businesses relocating here from the West Coast, for example. So those carve-outs make sense to us.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? I had just one quick question, which is, as I understand it, this bill deals only with dollars that are already being paid by the state to media companies already. Is that correct?
That's correct. Each budgeted year, each budget, it would just be an allocation of state budgeted funds, no incremental dollars at all.
Okay, so it would just be directing money that's already being spent in advertising in media organizations by the state to make sure that a certain portion of it goes to locally owned institutions.
Correct.
Great. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much to both of you for being here with us today, and thank you especially to Representative Farrar and Representative Morambello for their work on this bill. Local journalism is obviously essential to us doing our job correctly, and so we hope to encourage the success of local journalism here in the state of Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your support for journalism.
Thank you all.